Sun.
Warmth.
Relaxation.
Summer.
Grateful.
Heat.
Shiny.
Burning.
Sunscreen. Seeing.
Yeah, spectrum.
Hi everyone. Before we jump into today's episode, I have something a little bit special to announce. Over the next few weeks, we are launching a 4-part mini-series here on Light O'Clock, all about how we, as humans, interact with daylight. This series is inspired by the Daylight Interaction Project, a collaboration led by my colleagues Anna and Priji as part of the Daylight Academy. Together, they've been exploring how our daily light exposure isn't just about personal habits. It is shaped by where we live, the spaces around us, and the cultures and climates we grew up in. So questions like, how does our background influence the way we seek or avoid light? Does climate shape how we feel about daylight? And how much of our behavior is determined by the places we inhabit? All of these questions sit at the heart of this mini-series. Now, you just heard a fun little word association clip from the Daylight Academy Summer School. And some of those voices will come back in the course of the next episodes. But those quick reactions already show you just how many different meanings daylight can have. And so with that, let's jump into episode 1, where Anna, Priji, and I explore the role of location, climate, geography, and seasons in defining the way we experience light. Hi everyone, and welcome back to a special episode of Light O'Clock. I'm Caro, your host as always, and this time I'm joined by 2 colleagues who will co-host this episode with me, Anna and Priji. So guys, before we jump into the content of today's episode, why don't you go ahead and tell us who you are and what is your background?
Hi everyone, my name is Anna Billa. My voice might sound familiar to you because I've actually been on the podcast twice here. So if you're a frequent listener, you might recognize my voice. We had an episode on chronotype and one about school starting times and sleep. And my background is in psychology and neuroscience, and now work on healthy light exposure and variation in light behavior, seasonal changes of sleep and rhythms. And in general, I guess I'm interested in sleep health and circadian health.
Hey everyone, my name is Priji Balakrishnan. I have a background in architecture, specializing in creating build spaces that are pleasant, healthy, and sustainable, with daylight as the main focus. So I spend a lot of my time understanding how we can bring the right kind of light into our everyday spaces, and recently switched from an academic career to practice as a consultant. So I'm a daylight and a sustainability consultant right now in Berlin.
Cool. Great to have you guys as co-hosts for today. And so, as I mentioned, today we're recording a special episode because the 2 of you have been working on a project called the Daylight Interaction Project, which is funded by the Daylight Academy. And so this is a project about how we as humans interact with daylight in our everyday life and how that is shaped by our spaces. So for example, our cities, our environments, but also our culture, and how that in turn shapes how we behave around light. So can you tell us a little bit more about this project, the Daylight Interaction Project?
Yes, sure. So we basically received funding from the Daylight Academy, which is an academy that promotes international and interdisciplinary cooperation among scientists, architects, or other professionals who are sort of working around light. And this is how I met Priji, actually. And we applied for this project. And since she has a background in architecture, it was very nice to come together from different disciplines. And this led us to come up with a framework to conceptualize light exposure more as a behavior, but also like how this is basically shaped, as you already mentioned, by built environment, culture, and geolocation. And I'm specifically interested in the behavior part, but talking to other disciplines, you really realize that behavior is really not just, an individual thing, right? You always are placed within an environment like the built environment where we spend most of our time in. You also have culture that shapes how you interact with light. For example, there are lots of festivities around light in different cultures, like Christmas and so on, light festivals. You have different norms that fall into this. And of course, where you live plays a massive role on how you will expose yourselves to light, what relationship you have with light, whether you perceive it as something negative or positive, and so on. And so, yeah, this is basically sort of the framework. And we place these into different bubbles, which is the behavior bubble, the built environment bubble, the culture bubble, and the location bubble. And you might not sort of understand quite what we mean with this, but I think it will become clear throughout the recording. And I guess, Caro, we also linked the paper that we published on this, so you can also look this up if you're more of a visual type and wanna see what we mean with the bubbles.
Yeah, and I just want to add definitely that a picture of these bubbles would give you a nice, clear vision of what we mean by this framework as well. And if I can just describe that picture to you, so location sort of encompasses the culture, the built environment, and the behavioral interactions that we may have with daylight. And yes, through this project, I think Anna and I, we have had many, many conversations. We have learned from each other because we come from such different backgrounds, focusing on daylight, but one psychology and one built spaces. So we have had many, many interesting discussions intersecting these concepts of location, behavior, built environment, spaces, culture, and how all that influences how one perceives daylight. And to come back to what we did for this project and what we're going to be talking about in today's episode is that the Daylight Academy hosts an international or an interdisciplinary summer school on measuring light and illumination that happens every other year. Well, it happened twice in total in Chexbres in Switzerland. And it brings together participants from all over the world, from different disciplines, focusing on light. And for the second edition, where we did this recording in 2024, we had participants from 12 different countries. And the school is actually a residential school. So we all get together in Chexbres, we all live together. And it takes place in a very nice hillside setting, overlooking the glistening blue lake of Geneva and the Mont Blanc shimmering in the distance. And it catches all the colors of this. I should also say it's a summer days. And so you see the sunset, you see the sunrise, you see the blue skies, everything is sort of reflected in this black background against the mountain as well. And so Anna and I took this opportunity to sort of interview 4 of the participants coming from very different locations, disciplines, and cultural backgrounds. We spoke to them in depth, always circling around similar questions on how they perceive daylight, its color, feelings, sentiments attached to it, characteristics of their favorite spaces, where they lived or worked, how they used outdoor or indoor spaces, their childhood memories, do they remember the playgrounds that they played in, what really daylight meant to them personally, and so on. So we were trying to ask very indirect questions that could help the interviewees sort of narrate to us their experiences relating to daylight. And all the conversations that we had with participants, they were always in a very relaxed outdoor setting. And this was also to have such nice in-depth conversations and bring out really the personal experiences. And so when you hear the recordings, you do have a very different background soundscape. You have crickets sometimes chirping, you have winds blowing. And in one occasion, there was a festivity in Chexbres, and so you even have fireworks. So please do excuse us if there are some background noises, but they really add to the landscape that we were in. It was very picturesque. There was also a lot of different soundscapes, very green. And so it was a very, very nice scenic location for us to do this interview.
Great. So basically, just to summarize what you guys did, you had this concept of the different bubbles, so the different kind of things that shape our interactions with daylight, may it be built environment, geolocation, culture, and behavior. And then you use this opportunity of the summer school to kind of test this framework and then interview different people who were attending from very different countries to get their personal experiences and to refer to these different bubbles that you conceptualized in the paper. And yes, as you mentioned, we will link this visual in the show notes. And so the idea for today is that we're going to play you listeners some snippets of those interviews with these 4 participants, with these 4 interviewees, and then just chat between the 3 of us about what stood out from these interviews, the differences, the similarities, and also unexpected insights. And so first, let us hear actually who our interviewees were. So we will just play a snippet where they introduce themselves directly.
I'm Rishaya, and I'm a postdoc at TUM Create, which is the research partnership that is affiliated with TUM, based in Singapore. And we're currently working on a project on developing a mobile health application to optimize light exposure among older adults. So a little bit about my background. I'm a physiotherapist, and I've evolved into becoming a geoscientist, and my field of expertise, I would say, is geriatric science, preventive medicine, aging health, and health promotion.
So my name is Helga Iselin. I'm a lighting designer and an urbanist, and now I'm writing a PhD about light pollution and how we can design for reducing light pollution. I live in Oslo, and I come from Trondheim, which is a bit further north than Oslo, where we have quite long, dark winters and long, bright summers.
My name's Sophie. Right now I live in Rochester, New York, which is about 5 hours northwest from New York City. So whenever I say New York, people are always like, oh, you go to New York City? I'm like, no, it's so far away.
But in American terms, I guess it's relatively close.
Yeah, no, it's true. But yeah, so I'm living there while I'm doing a PhD in color science at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Oh, my background is in computer science and theater, which I don't really use anymore. I moved around a lot. So I was born in New Mexico in like the southwestern US. And then when I was 4, we moved to Lausanne.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So this is like a fun homecoming for me, kind of. And then lived there for like 10 years. And then moved to Ohio in the US, where I went to high school. And then I moved to California, like the Bay Area near San Francisco, for undergrad. And then I moved all the way back across to New York State for grad school. So yeah, it's kind of like every like new phase of life. I'm like, let me go somewhere completely different. So we'll see where I go after grad school.
My name is Andrea, and I'm from Costa Rica. I'm an architect. I started like my background in architecture also in my country. And then I made like a master degree in something that's called tropical architecture. But in this master's, I had the opportunity to be also in the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, where I also studied like for 6 months. And then after this time, I made like 2 studies after master, but they are called like postgraduate studies. And one is in lighting design. I currently live also in Costa Rica. I'm a professor in the University of Costa Rica. That is like the main public university. And in the architecture school, like in grad and also in master's.
Is Costa Rica where you grew up as well?
Yes, I've always been there, like born and raised in Costa Rica. Yes.
Okay, so just to summarize, we have 4 interviewees coming from very different parts of the world. We first heard from Rashaya, who lives in Singapore and works with older adults, trying to optimize their light exposure. And then we heard from Helga, who's an architect and lighting designer, and she lives in Oslo. And originally, she's from even further north in Norway, actually, from Trondheim. Then we have Sophie, a PhD student in color science, who lives in Rochester in New York State, not New York City, and grew up also in New Mexico, Switzerland, Ohio, and California. So really a mix of different countries. And lastly, we have Andrea, who's also an architect by background, who lives in Costa Rica, right at the equator. And yeah, she's been living there and working there for all of her life.
Yes, indeed, Caro. We got very lucky there. We got quite a variety of locations. And to just put this in the context of latitudes, some numbers coming up. where Singapore, where Rashaya, she works, actually she lives in Malaysia, both quite close, is very close to the equator. And if you think of the equator in terms of latitudes, that's the 0 degrees of latitude. And Singapore is just 1.3 degrees above in the northern part of this equator. So very, very close to the equator. And Trondheim, the other extreme or the most extreme in terms of northern latitudes that we had, where Helga is from, is like 63 degrees north of the equator. So it's quite far above and up north the equator. And this is also very, very close to the Arctic Circle, which starts at about 66.5 degrees. So we have someone quite close to the equator and we got someone quite close to the Arctic Pole. So this is really a good contrast when you hear their conversations as well. And Rochester, where Sophie is from, it is around 43 degrees above the equator. And New Mexico, where Sophie grew up, is about 34 degrees, all of which are these latitudes that are just above what we call the tropical zone and below the Arctic Circle. And this is how we are in Berlin. We are at 51 degrees. So it's this big chunk in between that we call maybe sometimes the temperate zone as well. And lastly, Costa Rica, where Andrea lives and works, that is 9.7 degrees. It's a bit above even Singapore from the equator. But this is very much in this tropical zone. So when you hear Rashaya and Andrea talk, it's mainly talking about the equatorial and the tropical latitudes. And we were all gathered. So we have all of these people who came to the summer school from very different latitudes, very different locations. And we are here in Chexbres, which was in this very nice mountainous location, located at about 46 degrees, just close to where Sophie came from, like Rochester, New Mexico, Berlin, like this. These are the temperate zone latitudes that we have.
And I think just to add, where Sophie also stayed, I think, for a couple of years. That's why we love so much, because she mentioned Lausanne as a place. And this is very close to where we were for the summer school.
Right. So basically all of these numbers that you mentioned, Priji, these degrees, they give us a sense of latitude, how far north or south each place is from the equator, this like horizontal line. And this is interesting because it helps us kind of understand and picture where everyone is located on the globe. But of course, location isn't just defined by this number, by latitude. There are actually also other factors, right, that shape what a place is like.
Yes, absolutely. So latitude is just one numerical way of describing a location. So places can have the same latitude, but very different altitudes, longitudes, geographical characteristics. Like in Chexbres, we had a mountain. Costa Rica, let's take the example of Costa Rica and Singapore, both very close to the equator. One is just both up north of the equator, but Singapore is in the eastern part of the world. Costa Rica is in the western part of the world. This is a longitudinal difference, but also Costa Rica, low density, very coastal. Singapore is a high density built environment, very tall buildings, also coastal, but characteristics of these two places, both geographically, physically, they are very, very different, though they may have the same latitudes. But for experts who work with daylight, like me, when we do consultancy, when we do research, latitude is just a good numerical way that gives us a very quick and clear picture of how much daylight is available. What is the sunlight intensity or the seasonality to an extent? So you tell me 1 degree from the equator, I'm like, that's north, but constant daylight, for example. So location in our framework that Anna explained earlier describes both these geographical coordinates, the latitude, the longitude, but also the surrounding environmental context. It's really the physical places, cities, countries, the broader climatic zones they are from, and the geographical context in which these places exist. So they are a very big definition. I just say latitude as a simple way to give people an idea of where they are and how different the climatic zones can be. But it is really a big definition that gives a whole picture of where these places are and how they may differ.
Super. Okay, so this brings us back to the episode today. We want to use this framework that we described to guide us through this episode. And so for the first episode, we explored location and how it shapes the way we interact with daylight. And we asked the participants questions like, how does sunlight and daylight make you feel? What is the color of daylight or city you come from? Any associations with daylight and darkness, and so on. So let's listen to this part, and we will start with Rishaya and her experience from Singapore and her associations with sunlight and darkness.
Seasons is we were only exposed to seasons based on what we read in books and what we see on TV. And it's really sad. The 2 times that I came to Europe, I got to experience the same season that I have back home, which is summer.
Mm-hmm.
So the concept of winter and autumn and spring, it's not something we can relate to because we don't have the luxury of experiencing that. Yeah. But I guess one thing that I appreciate is that we know we're going to get a good amount of sunlight on a daily basis throughout the year. There's not going to be a time where there's like extreme darkness for a prolonged period of time. We do have cloudiness from time to time, but I think it's not like there's a specific time when there's going to be less sunlight than usual. It makes me feel so warm, not in a literal sense. It just, I think that, I connect with nature a lot. And I just feel, because the one thing I lack in my space is ground. And so I feel like that is my alternative to grounding. I feel very grounded when I feel the sunlight hit my skin. So I think that's the connection that I have. And I don't know if it's psychological, but I feel like on some days when you wake up and it's, you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, just having that warm sun kiss on your skin just irons out the creases that you woke up in the morning with.
Okay.
Yeah. So I welcome the morning light and twilight, like dawn and dusk. I love when, that shift between night to the morning sun, and then of course the other way around when the sun is setting. But you will not catch me describing this positive feeling and, experience that I had with like the 10 o'clock sun till the 5 o'clock sun, because it is hot. It is hot. And then you couple it with the humidity. It's just not a good cocktail.
So just tell me 3 things, 3 words that you associate daylight with.
Comfort, clarity. What is the word for it? I feel like I know what I'm supposed to do based on the light. A sense of time. Yeah, I think I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes, there are days where I don't wear my watch, but I feel like when I look out the window, sometimes when I'm working and I'm like, oh my God, the light is this way, which means it's this time. And like these are the tasks that it connects with my to-do list. Yeah. I don't have a word for that.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
A sense of time, I suppose. Yeah. I think light helps me organize.
But you also mentioned the clarity. So that could be something.
Yeah.
When you think of darkness.
Funny, also comfort. I think I have a equal relationship with darkness. I welcome darkness just as much as I welcome light. Yeah. Perhaps I'm thinking maybe I'm a creature of like routine and habit. Like I know it's predictable, right? So with darkness, comfort, sleep, and falling.
Falling?
Yeah.
As in like falling down, trippling over something?
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I think because, I work a lot in geriatrics, right?
That was my connection.
So that was the connection. So like whenever we think about environmental modifications with older people who are, at risk of falls or already at high risk of falls, it's very important for us to consider how we're going to light the space with respect to avoiding falls and where we place the switches, how are you going to kind of set up the space? So I think that's why darkness, it just went to falls. Yeah.
Darkness, then it's more cozy, It's more like contemplation. It's like how do you call it? Philosophizing kind of like when you look at stars and moons, you start philosophizing. Yeah.
What is the color of daylight for you?
It's like light blue. Yeah.
So it's cold.
It's quite cold. Yeah. Daylight means efficiency, light. Like you have a lot of energy. Yeah.
Winter is very gray. It's very cloudy most of the time in the winter time. And the days also get like quite short. But then, and I feel like winter lasts fairly long into the, like that kind of weather and color lasts fairly long into like March, even like April. And then spring is kind of short, but is really nice. And we start to have more sunny weather. And then summertime is very sunny and pretty humid. And then I would say the colors are just sort of very bright. And then fall is really beautiful because the trees turn all kinds of different colors. There's a lot of like New England in general is sort of known, that like northeast part of the US is sort of known for really beautiful fall colors in the foliage. So that's really lovely. So lots of like really rich reds and oranges and even like bright yellow. Like there's one street near where I live where there's just, it's lined with trees that all turn like bright yellow and it's so pretty. So yeah, the fall is very like warm colors, which feels like a nice way to say goodbye to the sun before the winter sets in. So, and I would say the winter feels like it really starts kind of like around like November, December. So there's a nice little window of fall when it's not too humid and hot anymore, and you've got beautiful colors.
What's your relationship with daylight?
It's very different than when I was living in California. I was excited to have more seasons, but I didn't anticipate how much the sort of dark winter would affect me. And I was like going to my doctor and saying, I just am so tired all the time. Like, I don't know if I have some like deficiency or like whatever. And it turns out I did have a vitamin D deficiency, which most people have in that region. And yeah, that was also just sort of a learning experience of beyond the vitamin D part of it, just accepting that I would have less energy in the winter and that it's like okay to be less productive in that time and to kind of go through a cycle like that. But then it also really makes me appreciate the daylight so much more and really recognize when it's sunny and I go outside, I really kind of feel that energy come back, which is really nice. Yeah.
3 words that you associate with daylight.
Energy, definitely. Excitement and joy.
Now, if you think about darkness, do you have also 3 associations you can share?
Sleepy. I don't know, it's trickier. Because it's like not entirely negative, because I also like the kind of like cocooning and like feeling cozy and stuff. So yeah, I guess like sleepy, cozy, and tired. Like I feel like those are kind of different, like sleepy versus tired. Like sleepy is more like the pleasant, like, oh, I'm gonna like snuggle up with my cat, versus tired is more the negative part.
Okay, yeah.
Like gold standard for like the bluest a sky can be is where I was born in Albuquerque in New Mexico, because it's like in the desert. And so you can just get this, like, it's so saturated and so intense. And so with my parents, when we would like see a really, really bright sky, we would always say, oh, that's like an Albuquerque sky. We're like comparing it to like that specific blue that we all remember.
Yeah.
So I feel like in Switzerland, we definitely had some times in the summer where we'd be like, it's an Albuquerque sky. And I haven't really had that either in Ohio or in Rochester.
Right. Like the spaces that you sleep in are really dark. And in my country, that's not like, we have like curtains, but we don't have the other ones that go like all the way down. And like if you are sleeping, it's common that you'll see like a little bit of reflection, like when for the moon or and that's okay. So I don't think like in darkness, like entire darkness, I don't imagine it that much either. I think for me, it's really hard to think about daylight without thinking about like sunlight. It's really difficult. So when I think about how it makes me feel, I think that it makes me feel like hot. Yes, like I think it makes me feel hot. So if I go out, I will go out if there is not a direct beam like on top of me. So if it's like diffuse light and maybe the sky is not as bluish, and because for me the sun is always like up most of the time. So if the sun is up and it's like not so blue or there is a bit of clouds, then it's I think that sunlight makes me awake. Yes, and to feel like happy. But if there are no clouds, I think that it makes me think about hot.
Okay, yeah, I think that really showed us how or why we try to frame it in these different bubbles and categorize things, but also that these things are overlapping. So, when we talk about these bubbles with the location, the built environment, the culture, and the behavior, it's like a Venn diagram where these different bubbles overlap and they interact. So the bubble is really a category that encompasses different things. And I think in these comments that we heard, you see that you cannot just talk about location or just about your behavior. It sort of merges a little bit in between and they interact, right? Everything is sort of shaped and interacts and is interconnected. And I think we saw this in these comments here.
Yes, and also to bring back to the idea of how daylight really shapes a location, or let's say the location shapes the daylight and how they personally perceive about it. And you see the interviewees, we got lucky because they were all so poetic when they described the daylight and the places that they came from. And for example, when Sophie mentions that a gold standard of a deep blue sky is an Albuquerque sky, and whenever they see as a family a blue sky, that's an Albuquerque sky, that makes me really reflect about a not much explored part of daylight, its role as a placemaking tool. When we design with daylight or when we talk about daylight, we don't use this concept so much, but daylight has this inherent quality of placemaking, that its colors and how it paints our surroundings or the sky itself gives us this very unique sense of place. And even if you hear Rashaya mention about that in Singapore, she looks out of the window. She does not need even her watch to say what time it is. And daylight also having this quality of sense of time. And that's also intricately linked to the location, because you're so used to having daylight as a constant rhythm or daylight as a part of your life that you are able to even guess the time sometimes, or you miss a certain kind of daylight. Like when you see a blue sky somewhere else, you're like, that's a different kind of sky that reminds me of a certain kind of a place. And also the part where I think Sophie mentions about this rich autumn colors, and that's a goodbye to the autumn and, goodbye to the sun and a welcome to the winter. I found that really poetic, but also really going back to this concept of daylight as a placemaking tool that gives us a sense of time, that keeps us in place in a way.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I also found interesting in this word associations that you guys played with the interviewees about, word association with daylight and with darkness is that, for example, both Helga and Sophie mention more like slowing down and also the terms cozy or sleepy when referring to darkness. Whereas Andrea mentioned, for example, that sunlight on a clear day makes her alert and awake. So kind of there seems to be a connection between daylight and also maybe day length and how this influences how active and alert we feel. And actually, coming back to something that Andrea mentioned, so I think she made this distinction between sunlight and daylight. And so maybe for the sake of clarity, can one of you kind of explain what is the difference between these two things? Because I think they get confused quite a lot, or kind of used interchangeably.
Yeah, I can jump in. So daylight is both. It's the light from the sky and the light from the sun together. And that's what we refer to as daylight. Now, when you refer to sunlight specifically, it's light from the sun. And I hope Andrea's connection is the same as my definition. It could be different, but I do think it's probably the same. And when Andrea mentions sunlight, she actually means the direct intensity of the sun's rays in a way.
And maybe to add, we also actually had a focus group where we did some recordings with, and we actually also asked the people if they have different words in their own language for daylight and sunlight. And we will play these snippets in the next episode as well, and you will realize that not every language actually differentiates between the terms. So it's quite interesting.
Yes. And also when we asked them, I think there was also words to describe what kind of daylight it would be. Like when it's a clear sky, the kind of clear light that you receive, or when it's an overcast sky, the kind of light you receive. So even this had a differentiation in the languages when we asked this question. And I also want to bring back on Andrea's comment about how a clear sky made her feel. Because this is something when I came to the northern latitudes, so being in Berlin, that clear sky is not always associated with a pleasant, nice day to go out, which is really in the northern latitudes, or for that case, even in the southern latitudes, away from the equator, you have this very positive association of a clear sky being a very pleasant, nice, chirpy day to have a picnic outside, for example. And I think Andrea mentions this as, well, clear sky means hot. And that when it becomes cloudy, that's a pleasant day for her. And this also shows how location really shapes the way we see a clear sky. And also, I think Helga, when we asked her what the color of daylight is, and she says it's light blue and it's cold, that's also an association of how she thinks of daylight and maybe more clear skies in the winter. So I found this fascinating of how people or the interviewees automatically described and gave us this distinction that reflected on location, seasons, differences in how they perceive the daylight.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we already got a lot of differences and also some similarities between the interviewees, and we heard a little bit about the location, be that, the country or the city where they live, and how this shapes how they think about daylight and what they associate with daylight and darkness. But of course, their location also influences the cycle of daylight and darkness and how they change throughout the year, right? So not all of these locations that we have are represented with our interviewees. So Costa Rica, Singapore, Rochester in New York State, and Oslo in Norway have the same seasonal pattern. And so what also you guys wanted to find out is a little bit how these participants, these interviewees, interact with the seasons, right? And so we're now going to play another snippet where we go a little bit deeper into the seasonal changes and how people experience them.
We do use our spaces differently, but not because of seasons, because as the year progresses, the position of the sun changes. So like my mother-in-law, she loves her laundry. And like the first half of the year, you'll see the clothes hanging in the back because that's where the sun hits. And then like the next half of the year, the clothes are hanging in the front because the sun shines there. Yeah. The color of my hometown, I don't know. Like if you ask me the color of my hometown, I would say like where I stay and Borneo, I would say green. But if you ask me the color of Singapore, I think gray.
Nice. What about you?
Blue.
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 Okay, I got that now.
Like cyan.
Okay.
Yeah. And this scenery really resonates with me because we have the tallest mountain in Southeast Asia in Borneo. We have Mount Kinabalu. And I think we get a little bit of that blue there. And it's higher up. It's in the highlands. So that's a completely different scenery to like where I grew up, because it's just the landscape is different, the environment is different, the altitude is different. So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think the sky like changes a lot, like in the same day, because we actually have like only 2 seasons that you would call. So it's like the dry season and the rainy season. And when you think of the rainy season, like the sky is always covered like in clouds, but it's still bright. But most of the time, it's like from January till April that we have like the dry season, and then the sky is always like blue. Like for me, it's always blue.
And you said it changes within the day.
Yes, within the day, because like usually, even though it's not the rainy season, it's like a humid country and it rains. Like it's normal that it rains almost like every week or so. But the rains are not as heavy in the dry season as they are in the other season. So, and it's really, really humid space. Like most of the times the average is above 70%, like even on the dry season. So, like the cycle of water makes also like the sky looks sometimes gray and a little bit cloudy. So in the same day, you can have like clear sky, also like middle and way overcast sky in the same day.
So what happens then in Trondheim throughout the year? How do you experience the year in terms of the photo period, light?
Yeah, so in the winter, the winter is long, and the thing is that it's not only that it's long and dark, but it's also cloudy most of the time. I remember I had a friend who was from California, and he lived in Trondheim for some years, and I was out biking with him, and all of a sudden the sun came out. This was maybe February or something. And he had to stop the bike and just stand there on the pavement in the sun and like, I haven't seen the sun for 3 months. And I remember that I was like, yeah, it's true. And I just realized how this, for me, I'm so used to it. While for him, not seeing the sun for 3 months is painful, you know. So yes, indeed, the winters are long and they are grey. But I think a way to cope with it is you become really fond of playing in the snow. You go skiing, you go ice skating, you go, how do you call it, like with a snow sledge?
Yeah,
like sledging. You do all those kind of things. So yeah, like even me as a grown up love going sledging, for instance, and snowboard and slalom and all those kind of things. So that's kind of a way to deal with it. So I think all Norwegians agree on, or most Norwegians agree on November being the most difficult month, because that's before the snow comes. And in December, then most of the times December is white, and that's when you first of all the snow changes, so it's a lot more light, and also you have the opportunity to go playing in the snow. Yeah, so then like we have this winter where we cope by going out in the snow and also like bonfires and lighting candles, which is also super important for us. And then spring comes, and you know what? It's so amazing going around in the streets in Oslo, Trondheim, or probably all over Norway in spring when you have a sunny day, because everybody smiles, everybody's happy. and Norwegians are quite shy and kind of closed. But when you have a sunny day in spring, people shine. And it's really fun to see how like they're kind of they go out of their caves. And even also like I see my neighbors again, like in spring. Is like, oh, there you are. I haven't seen you for a half year. Yeah, you go to work early in the morning in the car, and then you come home late, and you don't stay that much out, you know. So yeah, indeed. So life is very different from the different seasons. Indeed, yeah, indeed. And then during spring, like when the days get longer, in kind of May, the days start getting longer, and it's not dark when you go to bed, and it's bright when you get up or you wake up really early by the light. So you have a few weeks where you adapt to these shorter nights. So I always have a week or two where I sleep a bit less, but then after a while I get used to it, and then I have a normal night again. So that's also one of the things that you kind of get used to, these short nights. Yeah. It's a lot easier to get out of bed when it's light outside. Winter is super hard to wake up when you have to wake up early. And yes, I indeed I have a morning routine with my meditation and yoga and all those kind of things that I do every morning. But indeed, in the summer, these things are a bit easier to get up and have time for all the things I want to do before going to work. And another thing that is like a big difference from winter to summer is, especially in the evenings, I'm a lot more lazy in the evenings. In the winter, I kind of cozy at home with my candles and a bonfire or a fireplace, while in the summer you're a lot more active. You go out and you meet friends and go to the forest after work. So there is indeed a big difference between the activity level for most people, at least. Yeah. What I noticed is that often autumn I feel that I am more energized in the early parts of autumn, at least. Kind of after summer, you kind of recharged, and then autumn is it's more energized. And then the later parts of the autumn, when it starts getting dark, then you start more going into this winter hibernation. Yeah, Trondheim is it's kind of more cloudy, more rainy. So the weather conditions are a bit worse in Trondheim, and also we have a bit more this extreme, with bright summers and dark winters. So where I grew up, for instance, it's there's a mountain that covers the whole village, actually. So you don't see the sun for 3 months, as I mentioned earlier. Or you see the sun, of course, if you go somewhere else, but we don't have sun on the house, kind of, or in that area. Yeah. In the summer, it's these long days, and also the feeling is really you have a lot of energy. You talk a lot more to people, and then the autumn changes into. Yeah, also you still have a lot of energy, as I said before, but you're more kind of, maybe more working now. I think maybe this is, now I just thought about it now, that maybe this comes from kind of old times. In the autumn, you had a lot of things you had to do because you had to gather the food and, make sure that you had everything for the long winter. And then it's the winter where you go into this more hibernation. It's more calm. Also, maybe more of this contemplation. We have one thing I really like to do. As I said before, I really like walking in the forest, but in the daylight, but also in the night, actually. And I think it's nice to walk in the forest when it's not on the lit paths, and then when I let my eyes adapt to the darkness, and also experiencing how it is to walk, where you kind of feel yourself more, you feel with your feet, you have to walk a bit slower, and you listen more, and I also realizing how big difference it is between when there's snow, there would be a lot of light. I would see everything I need. When there's a cloud cover, I also see a lot. While if there is no snow and no clouds, it would be quite dark, but it's still nice. It has this kind of nice atmosphere in the forest.
I usually say like dry season, but everyone in Costa Rica says summer.
Summer. Okay.
Yeah. Summer and winter, and it's not winter either.
And summer means dry and winter means monsoons.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we don't use monsoons actually. They don't use that word.
So what's the word you use?
Winter, or like it's this expression when the rain's really falling down that they say it's an aguacero. Aguacero, like a lot of rain coming. Yeah, but they don't use monsoon.
And because you mentioned also dry season and this, let's call it the summer and the winter, do you see something change in the seasons? Like does the place that you live change, or do your routines change, or how you see the city change? How is the place different?
I think the main difference is in vegetation. Like when you see landscapes, they look different, like greener or like really brownish. But we do not have like this autumn or spring. Like for me, it's always or either green or really like brownish. Yes, brown. And in people, I think not. I mean, sometimes a lot of rain gets makes it harder to maintain your daily routine, like to go outside and walk because you don't want to get wet. But I mean, people are still out. They don't usually use public spaces when it's raining because they don't have much shade as they should or much roofs. So, but like in the behavior of people, I think it doesn't affect that much. Like people have usually the same routine. They like even the length of the day is really not so different. Like in the summer, we'll have when it starts at like 5:30 maybe, and on the winter the sun starts at 6. And the same on the afternoon. Like the sun go down maybe in the summer at 6 p.m., 6:15, and then on winter it will go out like at 5:30.
But you mentioned then in the dry seasons the trees are browner. But is it because it's more clean, the leaves in the rain, or the leaves actually change color in the?
It's because they are dry.
Right. Okay. So shrivel and
yes, but they don't fall. I mean, it's just like they change, and maybe the fruits as well. Like there are some times where you will get more of some of the stuff and others, but it's not like almost all of the year you can have everything. That's also a big difference, I think. It's like the same, like in the landscape, so and in the agriculture as well.
Yeah, so what really resonates with me in this snippet is just the changes in the seasons. And actually it's so fitting because right now I sit here in Munich looking outside the window and I can see the leaves. They're beautiful, yellowish, but they're also fading away now, and autumn is sort of on its way, shading into winter. And I can so much relate to Helga also saying that November is a sort of a grim month. It's the same here because there is no snow and it's often very rainy and gray. And so, yeah, very much resonates with me, the changes of the seasons. Whereas, I don't live or I've never lived in a country where there are no changes. And I think I really need them. I really need them to structure my year. And I always look forward to the next season. I don't have a preference for any of them because for me, the change is the nice part, that you always appreciate the next one and what you have right now and how beautiful it looks and how it changes.
Yeah, same here. I grew up with seasons. And so I think for me, it would be very hard to live without seasons and without this change and kind of this change that dictates also like how you go about your activities. Yeah, your daily habits, really. And what I find interesting and what resonates with me as well in this snippet was, for example, how Helga and Sophie really described changing how they feel and changing how people act across the year. For example, Helga in Norway mentioned that, to cope with the winter, people there really become snow lovers and play with the snow, which really reflects kind of, adapting to what you have in a season where otherwise it's quite, dark. But I guess the snow brings a lot of white and, in a sense, light to the dark winters. While, for example, Andrea said that people in Costa Rica do not really change their behavior, which I also find quite interesting, considering that, they have no seasons per se. Andrea mentioned that people in Costa Rica don't really change their routines so much. So it's rather the vegetation, so, the trees that change across the year, but people don't really change what they do. So that's also an interesting comparison, I think, between locations.
Yeah, and I have the opposite experience from you too, where I have spent a large part of my life living in the tropics and about 7 years in Singapore, so right at the equator. And it's fascinating how seasons was a new concept in that sense of appreciating it when I came here to Berlin. And the constancy has been sort of part of my life for a long time. But also to reflect back on what Helga, she spoke about snow and how they had this positive association of snow and almost compensating for the short dark nights that they have. That snow gives them this opportunity to go out and be active and be more bright outside when it's there. And in the equator, we do also have a similar experience when there is thunderstorms and the rain comes down, and it's the same special feeling, I must say, that it makes you feel cozy, but more internal, like you want to sit inside, you want to drink a warm cup of tea, or, it's the same feeling, but I feel snow wants to bring you outside and the rain wants you to sit inside and enjoy it. So there's so much of, similarities and contrast and in these conversations when you hear them talk. And one thing that I want to, in terms of location, also bring about is this very drastic difference between seasonality in the equator and in the extreme latitudes, like either the northern or the southern latitudes. Because this is also my experience when I lived close to the equator or the tropics, that one day, in a single day, that can be very dynamic because you have a clear sky and suddenly overcast or thunderstorms. And this is how Andrea describes it in Costa Rica as well. The sort of very dynamic effect in a day. And, you couldn't be sitting and working and there's a clear sun coming through your window and suddenly the brightness can just drop all of a sudden. And this is such an experiential thing in Singapore as well. So, the clouds come together and then the light just drops. And this dynamic effect, as Helga describes it, I feel it's so stretched out across the seasons and it's so different between winter and autumn and spring and summer. And so that's really great also to reflect and hear how this is very different.
And then one other thing that comes to my mind when I think of the location is that when Helga mentioned that it's the mountains that steal away the sun, right? So, it's not just the location, but also how the location exactly looks like. If you're in a flat landscape where there is no mountains, obviously it's different. And I guess I sort of thought about this, but most of the time I think as architects, maybe Priji, you think more of how buildings actually steal away the sun during the day. But actually for people like Helga, and if you live in a very mountainous area, it's actually the mountains because you're so shaded by them and then you even get less light during the winter.
Yeah, that's right, Anna. And I find it fascinating that both Helga and you mentioned the word steal, steal the sunlight away. And I'm sure if you ask Andrea or Rashaya, they would say how pleasant and of a respite this shadow is if the mountains are there and if a building provides some shade in this very hot days in the equator. So yes, both the physical characteristics of a place, the geographical characteristics of the place, the built environment in a place, they really interact with location to either steal or to provide sunlight, daylight, shadows, and all these elements, they come together. And you can also hear how all the 4 interviews actually talk about this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is kind of a good summary note to end on our first kind of discussion on this location bubble that we talked about and that you guys also discussed a lot with the interviewees. So, we heard from 4 different people coming from 4 different countries at very different latitudes. And we discussed how that, for example, also determines the changes of light and darkness across seasons. So how some people experience seasons and some people really do not experience seasons at all. We also talked a little bit about how daylight is associated with temperature. So I think both Andrea and Rashaya, who are closer to the equator, and so really in this tropical climate zone, really associate daylight with heat, which is an association that, at other latitudes, if you're further away from the equator, you don't necessarily have. And so, talking about temperature, climate, these are also factors that go in this geolocation bubble. And then I think another feature that came out a lot in these interviews is colors of the sky. As Priji, you were reflecting how these are kind of signaling or pointing to a specific place. So how we can kind of think about colors as, indicators of a place. But also, of course, colors of the season, right? So I think Sophie was describing the yellow of the trees and this transition between the autumn and the winter. And so, all of these factors, latitude, temperature, climate, sunshine hours, and colors, how all of these things come into this geolocation bubble. And this is kind of the summary of everything that comes in this first bubble that we're discussing. And of course, as Anna, you said at the beginning, this intersects with all of the other bubbles. And I'm sure we'll have time to dig deeper into this overlap between these different bubbles that you guys pointed out in your framework. So thank you for now for your inputs and insights into this very cool work that you guys did at the summer school. Not sure if you want to add something just now.
Maybe just to have a little outlook. So in the next episode, I think we will be talking about culture and take a deep dive into how stories or meanings or lessons from daylight or the traditions and gender roles might actually influence how we interact with light. So I hope we hear you again next time. And thank you, Caro and Priji, for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And looking forward to the next episode.
Likewise. Thank you, guys.
Okay, and now we want to hear one association you have with darkness.
Stars. Northern lights.
Sleep. Winter.
Peaceful. Sad.
Atmospheric.
Calm.
Tired. Unable to see.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was nice. We're going to keep that as a snippet at the very end of the episode. Bye.
Hey.
That was really good.
Bye.
You have been listening to Light O'Clock. This podcast is produced by me, Caro. The podcast team includes many of my amazingly supportive colleagues and lab members. Manuel Spitzchen does the scientific fact-checking, and music, mix, and sound design are done by Ingo Bednarek. Show notes and additional resources are created by Maidel Fernandez Alonso and myself. Our social media team includes Lucien Bickerstaff, Nilufar Tabande, and Zara Alkaf. And Anna Magdalena Billa is our test listener. Light O'Clock is a podcast produced by the Translational Sensory and Circadian Neuroscience Unit, and we are supported by the Circadian Mental Health Network, the Viscom Prize from the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Psychologie and the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Psychophysiologie und ihre Anwendung, the Max Planck Society and the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics, and the Technical University of Munich.